All right, you beautiful people. Welcome back. It's been quite a while. I am totally exhausted after my first full day back after winter break. We had 2 weeks of intersession last past 2 weeks, so I haven't had full days. And here we are. Hopefully I can muster enough energy to make this worthwhile. To aid in that energetic effort, we of course will give a sacrifice to the Lord Apollo, in whom this stream is dedicated. Please, Lord of the lyre and of all sorts of wonderful things like medicine um, and disease, its opposite, science, etc. Please do grant this stream some wonderful fecundity of thought and of mind. Cut the baby Yoda, yeet him off the cliff, and let's begin. So today, we're going to do some more travel around Athens. This is the first time that we are all caught up with the class. So this is actually going to go a little bit ahead of where we've discussed in class. Hopefully, everyone has done the reading for winter break. um, so if you haven't done the reading, it's What If. This is chapter 2 of the reading. Check the Google Classroom. Also, chapter 6 of Persian Fire is going to be all about this. But today, we are going to start. No way. Oh, this is so disappointing. We were going to start in Aegina. I can't even fast travel. There's nothing there. So we're going to go here, I guess. And we're going to see how close to Aegina we can get. Wow, this could be devastating. So my first thought is we're going to travel to Aegina. I'll just tell you a little bit about it, and then we'll fast travel away. But Aegina is, as you could tell, this island right off the coast of Athens. And for a long time, they were commercial rivals. They were very close, and it's important to note that on the Assassin's Creed map, the proportions are a little off. Okay, so I think that is Aegina. We can take a look. Here is a giant freaking volcano. Do love this. And I don't know what volcano it is. Foundry of Hephaestus. Okay, so Hephaestus lives in there. We are not going to go try to find him because we are not Hephaestus and we will be completely engulfed in magma. But let's take a look where we want to go. So the Foundry of Hephaestus is here. Aegina is to the north. Let's see if we can swim in these roads without getting bogged down. And while we swim, I'll give you a little history. They're not super important, but they are worth mentioning in our story. So as you can see, they are right off the coast of Athens. You can see the Acropolis in the background there. And so Aegina was actually a central area of commerce in the Mediterranean. They have a wonderful position in the Saronic Gulf, which the Saronic Gulf is this whole area from the Peloponnese over here, the Isthmus of Corinth, and Athens. Here's the island of Salamis. Now, as I mentioned, the island of Salamis in reality is uh, much smaller than the island of Aegina. Aegina was a major city. It was a commercial entrepot. It was potentially the first place in the West to have its own coinage. And so we're going to see the transition between Aegina being the commercial powerhouse, and I guess the fiscal powerhouse. We go from Aegina minting most of the coinage to Athens doing so. We're going to look at towards the end of our stream at the Mines of Laurium. Honestly, since there's maybe I should just explore this with our hawk, because I don't think there's much that I can actually interact with here. But we'll take a look. Here is so one of the reasons I dedicated this stream to Apollo is here we have on Aegina the ruins of the temple to Apollo. It doesn't look to be inhabited in this game, which is disappointing, but that's okay. So, Aegina, this commercial entrepot and rival of Athens. Now, as we've discussed in our class, the Greek middle class they were hoplites. They were relatively well off. They were landowning farmers, and they took an immense amount of pride. In fact, it was part of their civic duty and responsibilities, and really what marked them as citizens was the fact that they owned land and could fight in a hoplite phalanx, right? If you could not own land and thus could not afford the hoplite panoply, you you were not a citizen, right? You were a landless peasant, and man, did it suck to be you. Okay, so you have the Athenians, the middle class, very proud to be hoplites, and so they're not wide-ranging on the sea, and it's not until the 6th century, the 7th and 6th centuries, that they really start to engage in commerce. The Aeginetans had been doing this for a long time, and so the Aeginetans have a much larger navy. They have much more experience on the ocean, and so when we get down to about 507 BC, the rivalry begins to get heated between these two city-states. And please, are you not even going to let me on the island of Aegina? Sadness. Is there a beach somewhere? Can I steal this boat? Let's see if I can steal a boat. I doubt I can. But let's see if I can steal a boat, because this story's about pirates. So the Aeginetans, they started to turn up the pressure on the Athenians. And of course, it bears mention that all of our sources are Athenian leaning, and so they're definitely going to... They call Aeginetan pirates, and we might call them, merchants with attitude, let's say. So the Aeginetans, they got upset about Athens trying to, or competing with them. It looks like I cannot fly this boat. It also looks like I cannot climb these cliffs. So we're going to sail around as I finish this story. So the Aeginetans, they ended up let's see how this works. Cleomenes, the king of Sparta, has to intervene between these two, because it seems like Aegina is going to Medize. They're going to side with the Persians, and that's a huge problem, especially because Aegina has one of the biggest Greek fleets. It's right here. Oh, look at this. There is something to find. They need to, wow, you can tell that I'm not used to being back at school for a full day and then streaming. I do apologize for the low energy. I have to rekindle this soon. But Aegina was going to Medize, and they were going to join sides with Persia, so right off the coast of Athens. Athens can't have this. So Cleomenes shows up. Cleomenes is that Persian king we keep talking about, and it tries to broker a deal. It doesn't go that well, and eventually the Athenians, they're rounding the Cape of Sunion. They're going to pray. It's over here. There's a temple to Poseidon here. And the Athenians, they're sending some notables around here. They're going to make some sacrifices. It's this big ritual, etc. And the Aeginetans show up, and they kidnap everyone. And that is essentially a declaration of war. Oh, hello, random traveler. Oh, you are creepy. And so, a war breaks out. The war lasts quite a long time. It's one of the major inter-Greek conflicts at the time of the Persian invasion. And what ends up happening is the Themistocles is this major democratic Athenian politician who we will encounter a lot during the Second Persian invasion. And he uses the threat of Aegina to instill in Athens a sense that they need to build up their navy. This navy ends up becoming important in the repulsion of the Persians, but Aegina is the proximate danger. It's Aegina that creates the fear in the Athenians that causes them to actually put a huge amount of effort and attention to their naval capabilities. So this culminates. Oh, so I can't even. So you saw that there was a vantage point here that they have just removed. Okay, we're getting out of Aegina. Obviously, they don't want us to be there, so we're gonna fast travel to the Piraeus. So, for most of Athenian history up until this point, so the 7th and 6th centuries BC, there was a port in Athens that was right next to the city called Phaleron, or Phaleron. So here we go. This is in here. This is their first port. Of course, Aegina's right there, and it's wide open. And so the Aeginetans show up in the dead of night one time, and they burn the whole thing. And the Athenians just watch this happen. They're like, oh my god, this is terrible. It's humiliating, and the Athenians can't really do anything. I think at this point they have very few ships. They essentially don't even have a full navy because their entire citizen class is bent on being hoplites. Woohoo! And I did not break a leg. So it was a real uphill battle to encourage or persuade the Athenians to build a navy or invest in ships when it was antithetical to the very way of life of many of its citizens. Nevertheless, when the Aeginetans burned down the Bay of Phaleron, that was enough for Themistocles to say, hey, we need to upgrade the Piraeus. And here we have Poseidon, it looks like, which is very fitting, right? We're at a naval base. I hope this is Poseidon. Let's pretend it is. This is not a trident, and in fact, we're going to pretend it's Poseidon, right? It's got to be. Yeah, this is not a trident. There's a snake, so whatever. We'll give it to them. So at the port of Piraeus, Themistocles said we should. It wasn't a port yet. Themistocles says we should fortify this port. It's a further 2 miles away from Phaleron, right? So instead of this bay right here, which is right next to Athens, this is essentially 2 miles. But look at this port. It's far better fortifiable. You can garrison. It's protected. And so this became the main naval base of Athens, and then later all of Greece. This becomes, when Athens becomes a naval empire, also known as a thalassocracy, or a government by the sea, the Piraeus is their central area of control. This is where they're going to build all their ships. It's where they're going to take care of them. Triremes back in the day, which we're probably going to see very soon. Triremes are all wood, sometimes with a sheet of bronze at the bottom. Nevertheless, that sheet of bronze was there to try to prevent corrosion of the wood, but nevertheless, the sea will destroy anything. And so every night, the triremes would have to be pulled out of the water onto the beach. They'd be scrubbed down, but even then, you would have every year or every few years, you'd have to do a lot of maintenance on these boats. And so that would be one of the uses of the Piraeus, is as a dry dock, or a place where you can pull the ships out of the water to fully repair them. So here we have an Athenian banner, as we know. The Athenian banner is inspired by the coinage of Athens in the 5th century BCE. These coins show the main goddess of the city, Athena, on one side, and an owl on the reverse. The owl is Athena's symbol. It's her animal, kind of like how Poseidon has the horse. It's also one of my favorite animals, for probably the same reason. I like Athena. She's my favorite divinity, and owls are cool. Unfortunately, I hate this owl. I think it looks so silly, these giant eyes. So every time I'm looking for like dope owl iconography, like I want to get a big tattoo right here or something, I don't want an owl that looks like that. I want a cool owl. So if anyone's in the chat and knows of some cool owl pictures that I can get tattooed on my body, hit me up. That'd be really much appreciated. Anyway, Athena had several known attributes, but mainly was associated with warfare, handicraft, and wisdom. Right. So we saw the shrine to her and Hephaestus in the Athenian Agora. Athena at that point that's the Athena of handicraft or artisan work. But here we're in the Piraeus. This is probably going to be more towards the warfare aspect, right? This is a naval base, but also it's a major commercial harbor. 2% of all the goods brought into the Piraeus were taxed, and so this is, as if you've had me as a teacher, you know this. The best way to collect taxes is at entry points or places where trade happens. So if a merchant is coming to the city, you tax them based on the goods they are bringing into the city right there. No one is keeping good enough records to, at the end of the year, compile all their documentation, give it to the court officials or the city officials, and say, here's 2% of everything I made. No one can do that. Basically no one can read back in the day. So that's asking a lot. And so the same thing with the Piraeus, right? As a ship comes into the port, in order for it to be able to offload its goods, it needs to pay 2% of the value of its holdings to the city authorities, to the port authorities. And the U.S. was the exact same way up until the income tax was levied in 1916, I think. Before this, almost the entire federal budget came from import taxes. The only exception being land sales, because the government, bought a bunch of land and then sold it to the American citizens, and that's why we have such a strong sense of protecting our own land, as well as most of the land in America has been divided and sold long ago. The owl of Athena symbolized the goddess's wisdom and protection and was often depicted beside her in iconography. These Athenian coins were so emblematic that they were called the glauques, or owls, in antiquity. And as I've mentioned before, we're going to check out the Mines of Laurium, where, oh, this is fun, I got a new mount, where we will see the minting of the mines. But here first, we're going to check out, there looks to be a tour of the Piraeus and a boat, and I really do hope we get a look at these triremes that are going to become oh so important as we face off against the Persians. So here are the dockyards. Here is a crane. This is cool. So if you can figure out the physics of this, twisting of this will raise and lower that crane with this central point as a, can I call it ballast? I don't know. I never took an engineering class. You can tell, look at these boats are very different from a trireme. They're wider, they're rounder, they don't have 3 banks of oars. In fact, I don't know if they have any oars, right? A merchant is going to try to lower their costs as much as possible. Paying people per day to row for you is very expensive. So here are merchant ships, black figure cut by the painter Nikosthenes. 520 to 510 BCE, maritime trade was essential for Greek cities, and certain products could only be acquired from overseas, right? As we mentioned in the very first episode, Greek cities are much closer to the coast than they are to each other, and overland travel is really, really hard. Trying to bring a wagon from one area of Greece to another is a disaster because it's so mountainous, and the roads back then were trails, essentially. So it was all about travel and transport by sea. Large-scale trade occurred in the Emporion. This is where we get the word emporium. Greeks conducted business amongst themselves, but also with other places like Egypt. And one of my students has taken the polis of Naupactus in Egypt, which is an area in the Nile Delta that is peopled mostly by Greeks. And actually one of the 3 major Greek polis in Naupactus was Aegina, those erstwhile enemies of Athens. Traded goods included grapes, olives, wine, amphoras, grain, wood, metal, ore, textiles, and slaves. And here we have these look to be merchant ships, right? You don't have these banks of oars. They do still have this beak at the front, which makes me think that they are like a naval ship, right? This beak being used to ram other ships, but I might be wrong, or I might be mislabeling that. It could simply be a way to cut through the ocean. Alright, so here's Aspasia to tell us a little bit more about the Piraeus.
Greetings, wanderer, and welcome to the port of Piraeus. Acting as a port for Athens, Piraeus welcomed merchants, goods, and travelers from all over the world. It was a central part of Athens' economy, but it was also fortified enough to protect the city's considerable fleet.
And there's our first try.
When you finish exploring the port, find me, and we will talk further.
Alright, so first off, let's change our mount to that new one. We got that traveler's horse. Very cool. Love that. Should we name him Bucephalus? Is that overdone? Maybe it is. We don't need to name him Bucephalus, but come up with a name for me, and I'll name our horse that. And we're Pythagoras right now. I think we're gonna go. I wish we had is Themistocles an option? Sophocles was both a playwright and he was a navarch. He embarked on several naval missions during his lifetime. Unfortunately, it does not look like does not look like Themistocles is an option. We will, however, we'll go with Brasidas. This is ironic, Brasidas being a devastatingly effective Spartan general who killed many Athenians. So here he is walking around the Piraeus.
Piraeus, a peninsula southwest of Athens, became the city's main port after the politician Themistocles encouraged the development of its natural harbours. These developments led to the gradual abandonment of the older harbour of Phaleron. Piraeus's fortifications were further developed by Cimon and Pericles, along with the long walls, which ensured goods could still be moved during sieges. Piraeus was divided into three main sectors: the military port, the emporion, and the residential area. By the 5th century BCE, it had become not only Athens' naval headquarters, but also the mercantile center of the Mediterranean.
Yeah, so Athens is one of, if not the biggest Greek city-state, and so it's going to be a main central hub, and then it becomes the most powerful naval state, and so the Piraeus augments its natural geographic suitability. Look at this; it's incredibly well positioned. Whereas this is Phalerum, right? It's wide open, and thus the Aeginetans could just wander right in, burn everything down. This is much more easily guarded. Piraeus was divided into three sectors: Zea and Munichia on the east side, and the Grand Kantharos harbor on the west side. This is the Kantharos harbor, and here is the harbor of Zea. Oh, that's actually very cool. I didn't know this. So we've got three harbors, these two, and then this is the big one. Piraeus' agora, called the Hippodamian Agora in honor of the architect Hippodamos, was located near the cove of Zea. It functioned as a local market, but also as a political and military meeting place. So this is the cove of Zea that we're talking about, and this is the market and military meeting place. The Munichia harbor was Piraeus' main military port. So these two sides are the military sides, and was mainly made up of storage areas and ship sheds. The Kantharos harbor, which is also the largest natural harbor in the Mediterranean Sea, that's a cool fact, housed the Emporion, where international trade took place. So I'm thinking, as I'm looking at this before I read all this, I'm like, this has to be the military harbor, right? Because all I'm doing is learning about and reading about the Persian wars and the invasion and the hundreds of triremes that are built. And no, of course it's not, right? This is where the food comes in. This is where all of the goods that feed, clothe, and are traded by the Athenians. That's where they go in, and the military bases take the two opposite sides. Let's take a look at this whole thing. So here we have the Emporion. This is going to be the main trading center of Athens. And then, if this is to be believed, on the other side, this side is going to be the other ports, the military ports. So let's see if we're led all the way over there in this point.
Piraeus' development during the 5th century BCE attracted a large population. Many craftsmen, merchants, bankers, sailors, and ship owners moved to the port in great numbers. The population was a mix of Greek citizens, foreign visitors, and immigrants, known as metics. The variety of the port's inhabitants gave Piraeus a cosmopolitan atmosphere. Most of the residents were involved in trade, but others worked on shipbuilding or in larger-scale industries like shield factories. Piraeus' commercial focus offered many opportunities for those seeking to increase their wealth and status. One such rags-to-riches tale is that of Passion, a slave who eventually became a citizen and earned a fortune thanks to his bank and his shield factory.
Cool. Bank and shield factory. Yeah, so we saw the Agora last week. That's where the day-to-day trade of individuals is going to go on. If you want to buy something, just like consumer goods, you're going to go to the Agora and you can find whatever you want. The bulk goods and the wholesale goods, right? People offloading a whole ship to then be sold to a merchant who will take it to the Agora is taking place at Piraeus. Medics made up a large part of the port's population. It's estimated that at the end of the 5th century BC, there were anywhere between 5,000 to 6,000 medics living in Piraeus. These varied inhabitants added to the port's cosmopolitan atmosphere. Medics are invariably defined as resident aliens, which I think is not the nicest way to call immigrants, right? They aren't born in Athens, or maybe they might even be born in Athens, but they're born to parents who do not have Athenian citizenship. So they are immigrants who are working there. They often have ties to other polis. They might be traders living there for a short period of time, or they might be permanent residents. Medics also had an impact on religious practices in the Piraeus. Sorry, I say the Piraeus, that's how I was introduced to it. Many people just use Piraeus. It's kind of like Ukraine and the Ukraine. From at least the 5th century BC onwards, medics introduced the worship of various Eastern deities such as the Thracian goddess Bendis and the Egyptian god Isis. The cults these immigrants brought with them created a varied and colorful spiritual life within the neighborhood. So Isis, oftentimes, this is a great example of syncretism, or different pantheons kind of syncing up together, right? Isis was often associated with Aphrodite, and so the Egyptians called her Isis, many Greeks called her Aphrodite, and when they met up with each other, like, oh, same goddess, it's. And this is why you don't have a lot of polytheists burning anyone else at the stake, right? Instead, they're just like, oh yeah, we got room. We got 500 gods. What's one more?
Piraeus was a demi, or district, of Attica. Because of its size, function, and varied population, it had a much more complicated administrative structure than other demes. Above all, Piraeus was closely monitored and controlled by the Athenian assembly due to its importance to the city. Within the port, there were two separate categories of trade: international trade, which took place in the Emporion, and retail trade, which was managed by Kapoloi in Piraeus's agora.
Cool, so he said demi, it's deme, and there's about 120 to 130 demes. And so they talk about Piraeus being a special one, right? So if you take a look at, oh, I can't, can I? Yes. So if we take a look at all of Attica, this whole area is divided into 130. Many of them are like, oh, this is space, right? Oh, there are people here. Okay, chill. And then there's one of them that is the most incredibly important commercial center in the entire area. So it's kind of, imagine like Washington, D.C., where they're like, okay, this is a special district, it's a special city, it's ruled specifically by Congress, right? There's something beyond other demes that we have to take into account with this place. In 393 BC, remember we are in class between 489 and 483 at this moment. So we're between the wars after Marathon, but before the Second Persian invasion. In 393 BC, Piraeus' Emporion was attacked in a daring raid by the Spartan Teleudios. Teleudios was the commander of a small fleet based on the island of Aegina. Those Aeginetans! His forces sailed 12 triremes into the Grand Harbor at daybreak and took the Athenians by surprise. As a result, Teleudios was able to capture a number of merchant ships. The raid ended up discouraging foreign traders from traveling to Piraeus, which put Athens' economy in jeopardy. Consequently, Athens was forced to negotiate peace with Sparta. Interesting. So this is 10 years after the end of the Peloponnesian War, and once again, apparently, Athens and Sparta were at war with one another. Some things never change.
The Emporion was a commercial port dedicated to trading goods from overseas. All international transactions were required to be made within its limits and needed to be exclusively wholesale. Elected magistrates managed all business and laws in the port. Meanwhile, port authorities known as epimeletes oversaw trade and took care of the regulation of prices. This was an especially crucial duty, as the amount of supplies and goods could fluctuate wildly based on factors like bad harvests or lost cargo. Common products sold in the Emporion included vegetables, fruits, fish, leather, timber, marble, metal, weapons, and ceramics. According to Hermippos, Athens was also wealthy enough to afford the finest goods from all over the world, including figs from Rhodes, almonds from Thasos, oil from Samos, and wine from Chios. Taxes were collected on all merchandise that came into the Emporion, which provided Athens with a major source of income.
Cool. So, if anyone's watching who wants to do a paper on the Epimelides, I've never heard of this before. Super interesting. 1 page. Bonus points because I'm asking for it. But the price controls, I think, are really interesting. What does this look like? So they are in charge of making sure that the prices don't fluctuate too wildly in case there are bad harvests, or as they say, bad harvests or lost cargoes. What you don't want is for prices to jump 50% in 1 week or even 1 season, right? Especially if 1 week there's a dearth of one type of good that is typically found in the harbor. You don't want merchants to be able to show up and be like, oh, I'm jacking up my prices ridiculously. Right, so the Epimelides are probably saying, hey, this is the acceptable band or range within which you can trade. But I don't think they're going to have price controls. Right? That's a much more totalitarian system. You also have, if you caught this, it's only wholesale. So like I was mentioning before, right? This is the wholesale market. You can only buy and sell large quantities of goods for further resale later on. If you're trying to barter and sell individually right off your merchant ship, you're going to be clogging up a lot of space that could be more useful for bringing goods into and out of the port, right? You have to keep these moving, as we've seen in our own supply chain woes of this year. The look at this. Epimelides, who administered the Emporion, were appointed on an annual basis. Their duties included overseeing trade and ensuring the quality of goods and commodities. They enforced the rules of law and made sure no transactions were concluded outside the Emporion. And they supervised money changers and took care of complaints regarding exchange fraud. So this is similar to what we saw in the Agora. In each of these places, you have overseers, or what we would call regulators today. But because all of the trade and commerce is happening in the open physically, right? They're or at least most of it, they're able to really establish a pretty secure, I would imagine, oversight, right? And people who feel cheated are very easily able to find these magistrates and bring whoever cheated them to that magistrate's attention, like right there. So I'm not positive. It seems like the Athenians had a pretty good sense of justice and commercial regulation, which would have encouraged more people to go to Athens and trade with them if they respected the administration of justice, if they saw that it was fair, that they saw that the magistrates worked well. In large cities like Athens, the Epimelides shared some tasks with other specialized magistrates. These magistrates included the Nautodikai, who were in charge of justice, the Sitophilakes, who supervised the sale of grain, and the Pentakostalogoi, who collected commercial taxes. Is it just me, or am I getting a little better at pronouncing Greek? I think this is helping. I'm learning a lot here. Let's take another look at this Piraeus. Very cool. I wonder, are any sharks in the water? Yes, there's a shark. I don't know if you saw that. Try to dive on him. Cool. Excuse me. Ooh, look, some Thracians. Are they Thracians? I hope I didn't say that too quickly. Hope I'm not profiling any Thracians.
After arriving in the Emporion, merchants set up samples of their goods in a display area called the Aegina. This was where citizens and foreigners gathered to officially make their deals, and almost all merchandise that came into the Emporion was traded within the area. The Aegina was under constant supervision by magistrates, who negotiated price control with the importers. They would occasionally give special privileges to those who agreed to sell at lower prices. These privileges ranged from tax exemptions to specially reserved seating in the theater.
That's a cool way to carry out one's civic responsibility, right? So that you've got these public magistrates who are pushing the merchants to sell things to the Athenian citizenry at lower prices, and in return they might get some tax exemption, preferential seating, other privileges. Um, Especially during times of crisis or famine, I could imagine taxes being waived for different foodstuffs, especially. Athens was the head of the Delian League and would often wield its maritime power and influence against other Greek cities by creating trade blockage. I don't know if it was often, and we'll get to this in class in a month or so, but the Delian League is the transition or the evolution of what had been in this anti-Persian league created to fight the Persians and protect Greece, and the Athenians turn it into the Athenian Empire. First, it's the Delian League, pay us money or give us ships, and we'll keep the Persians out of the Aegean. And then eventually it becomes everyone's giving Athens money, um, and then it eventually becomes give us money or else because you don't have a fleet anymore. You've just paid us to man your fleet. It's kind of like NATO, and honestly, like you could totally see America doing that right now. I mean, maybe not. We don't have the same type of cohesive leadership that you would need, but America's in the same position where America has footed the military bill and budget for the West for what 30, 40, 75 years, um, and at a certain point, the U.S. could just be like, okay, you belong to us now because you let your military wither, and we have nukes. And what could they say? That is the same kind of thing that the Athenians did with the Delian League. For instance, when the sacred land between Attica and Megaris was occupied by the Spartan allied Megarians, Athens forbid Megara from trading in any harbor belonging to the Athenian Empire, or the Delian League, so most of the polis in the Aegean Sea. And in doing so, cut off the city's main economic resource. This was one of the reasons that the Peloponnesian War broke out. Megara was really hurt by this Megarian decree, and they went to the Spartans, who were their allies, to protest. So this turned Megara against the Athenians. And Megara, I have no idea. All I know is that one of them is the name of the love interest in Disney's Hercules. Yeah, so Megara is somewhere over here, but I don't think it's labeled.
Piraeus was a deme, and as such was supervised by a magistrate called the Demarchos. While most demarchoi were chosen locally within their deme, Piraeus was appointed directly by Athens, so the city could better monitor its commercial interests. In fact, matters regarding the Emporion, the military harbour, and the grain trade were regularly debated and decided by the Athenian assembly. Transactions within the Piraeus were supervised by metronomoi. These were magistrates responsible for keeping track of weights and measures. They made sure merchants' measurements were always accurate to prevent bad deals and scams. Even though Piraeus would eventually develop into a city in its own right, it always remained under the control of Athens.
Cool. So we've talked a lot about metronomoi on this stream, the people who are in charge of the weights and measures and why that's really important. I think it's really cool, though, that the assembly has direct control over Piraeus, and they're appointing the Demarchos, and you have the Athenian citizenry able to exert its interests over this commercial hub of the Piraeus. And so you have, unlike in modern America where commercial interests are set by so many different actors, and the basic citizenry get very little say in how trade, commerce, regulations, finance, etc. are conducted. Here, because it's democracy, everyone gets a say. The trade conducted in the Emporion was subjected to tighter surveillance than other places in Attica, and merchants who violated the rules could find themselves facing serious consequences. Metronomoi probably had the authority to impose penalty charges and bring fraudulent merchants to court, and other magistrates like Agoronomoi and Sitophilakes likely had similar powers. Inscriptions from the 2nd century BC suggest that magistrates also had the right to destroy any undersized container and confiscate its contents. This is a bronze weight of 1 mina. This is from far off in the east in Seleucia, but this does give you a sense of mina is both the word for type of currency. It's also here a weight, and same thing. Think of the British pound, right, or the French livre. These both translate to units of measurement. Peso in Spanish means pound, right? So the measurement of weight and value are inextricably linked throughout human history. And here we have the scale. Look at that. So we've got a sack of, looks like grain, and on the other hand, I'm going to step. Can I stand on this? Yes. And I don't change the weight. That's sad.
A commercial tax of 2%, or a pentecost, was placed on all cargo entering and leaving Piraeus. The tax was collected by a group of 5 people called Pentecostologoi.
No way.
According to Andocides, this position could be bought for the hefty sum of 30 talents, or 180,000 drachmae. However, most of these officials made a profit of up to 6 talents, making the job very lucrative. While merchants were responsible for setting the value of their goods, Pentecostologoi had the power to challenge the value, if they saw fit. Furthermore, merchants were required to register with these officials before they could transport, display, and sell their goods. Overall, this system provided Piraeus, and by extension Athens, with a tremendous amount of money.
Yeah, so tax collecting in the ancient world was like super corrupt, and the ancients really they just accepted it. Thank God, right? I think it's a good thing when you have a system rife with corruption. Eventually, you just think, okay, we get it. And so the Pentecostologoi, they have to pay for their office. Right? Sorry if you can hear the doorbell. They have to pay for their office up front, and then they are expected to just glean a bunch of money off the top. Roman tax farmers, they weren't expected to glean anything off the top. They were just expected to take everything, right? Give us $100 million up front, and then you take whatever you can get in the East. And that led to horrible corruption, like brutal, they really immiserated the people of the East. So here we're going to learn more about the Pentecostologoi, and these are the 2%. The Nautodikoi were also responsible for administering and imagine how many bar fights just ended in a whole ship being seized, or if you could imagine some slimy Athenians throwing the first punch and being like, that guy hit me, right? That kind of thing. To counter the Nautodikoi's power, some states had a judicial convention called the Symbola. It protected merchants from harassment by ensuring them the right to be judged by a city court. Cool. So there you see competition working in favor of justice. Going to be seeking out places where they can trust the rule of law. And so if Athenians were constantly abusing their privileges and running screaming to the Nautodikoi, then you would imagine that merchants would begin to not frequent that area. So here we have more aspects of the Emporion. And so oftentimes, it's one of the sad facts, but like often the best news that you can get is the news meant for financiers, right? People in finance people in commerce, they need to know the facts. They're not looking for a Fox News, you know, like, I guess, slanted reporting, shall we say. Um, they really need as cold and bloodless of facts as possible so that they can make their decisions for their property, right? Having your property seized by government authorities is the worst possible outcome.
The sale of grain was overseen by special magistrates called sitophilakes. Since some Greek cities had a grain deficiency and relied heavily on imports, these officials were extremely important. Their duties encompassed all aspects of grain commerce, including price control and profit margins, to ensure Athens remained well fed. This is no surprise. Grain was so important to Athens that 2/3 of all stocks were required to be transported and sold at the city's agora by law. According to Demosthenes, the significance of the sitophilakes was such that if they failed in their duties, they faced the death penalty.
Yeah, because if they failed in their duties, the city faced the death penalty. Athens, beginning in the 6th century, maybe even before, had to import a huge amount of its food from outside of this map, from the Black Sea. So through the Bosporus, on the other side of Turkey, in the Black Sea. It is extremely rare for a pre-modern society to import its food in any quantity, and Athens was one of the very few exceptions to this rule. I guess the Mediterranean is a place where this frequently happens, but most of the time people are going to be fed within from food grown within a few miles of where they live. Major cities and the hub of powerful empires are going to be exceptions. Rome imported a lot of food. Athens imported a lot of food. And so, you know, I think it's even a majority of their calories are coming from overseas. So the sitophilakes are incredibly crucial to keeping everyone fed, right? Civilization is famously 3 meals away from revolution. So you need to make sure the grain shows up on time or else all bets are off. The Peloponnesian War saw some changes in how bread was produced and consumed. Firstly, poor people began to eat bread, a food previously reserved for the rich. Similarly, bread started to be baked commercially rather than just in individual households, giving bakers the opportunity to make small fortunes. That's really cool. It's kind of like what we're seeing today, where Athens, because it's connected to this dense Mediterranean commercial hub, it's able to trade so easily with all these areas. The people of Athens are able to trade, they're able to get wealthier, and they're able to start to offload more and more of their responsibilities, right? In the present day, it's really my generation, millennials, that have begun to offload the responsibility of providing food for themselves, right? Most of my friends eat out most of the time. I eat out maybe 50% of the time, and that means I cook way more than my friends. And then yeah, and previous generations, everyone was cooking for themselves. Oh, it's louder than my voice. Thank you for telling me. Is my voice quiet? Do I need to turn that up? Or should I just turn my audio down? It's so low. Well, let me know if you can't hear me. I can turn up my... I can even pull this out like oh man, look, we're invading the star systems. God, I can't do this. I look like my worst nightmare. But hopefully that's a little louder.
The Emporion operated on a foundation of credit and loans. Overseas commerce was handled by 2 types of tradespeople. Emporoi transported cargo in borrowed ships, while naukleroi were ship owners who moved goods on their own vessels. Elsewhere in the Emporion were bankers and accountants who arranged loans and kept track of incoming and outgoing ships. Emporoi and naukleroi financed their maritime voyages with these loans, which often had a high interest rate due to the dangers of sea travel. Emporoi used the loans to pay for both the cargo and the right to a ship, while naukleroi only had to pay for their crew. Loans and interest were repaid upon a ship's return to port. However, in the event of a catastrophe such as a shipwreck, the merchant and ship owner were released from their obligations, and the losses were transferred to the lender.
Cool. Yeah, so early credit and finance is really, I think it's really interesting. It's also really harsh, right? We have loans in the single digits nowadays. Back in the day, it would be much greater because, first off, people's credit worthiness was much harder to ascertain. Things were way riskier, right? Today, we don't have Aeginetan pirates living right off our coast, right? This is not something that we typically have to deal with. We got the US of A and like some big aircraft carriers ready to interdict any Somali pirates, and that's hilariously sad because you've got people who are starving versus the greatest military the world has ever seen. And that drops the insurance rate or the rate of interest uh, way down, right? These lenders have to be worried that if anything bad happens, they're on the hook for all of that. I think it's also interesting to hear some of these people, we might call them entrepreneurs, are they own their own boat, and so they're going to buy their whatever they want to sell in one harbor in, say, the west coast of Turkey, and then they're going to come back and they're going to sell it and hopefully make a profit. On the other hand, people will rent ships, and they're probably paying someone else to steer. They're probably not piloting the boat or anything, but they're going to say they're going to rent the ship, and they're going to put their own goods on there and say, please sail here and make the sales. Or honestly, maybe they travel on the ship as well to make the sales at the final place. But they're contracting out their boats. So in the 1500s, which I'm most familiar with, the Spanish king, just to go back to the interest rates, was paying something like up to 40% on short-term loans. This is under 6 months, which is egregious. It's really brutal. And I imagine it's probably not that bad in ancient Athens, but it's probably going to be similar. The sailing season is from spring to late summer in the Mediterranean, and so you can probably do 1 or 2 voyages during that time. And so you're going to be paying, I don't know. I shouldn't say I have no idea what the interest rate is going to be. It's going to be much larger than today's modern business loans because there's so many more things that could go wrong. In Greek cities, some temples held reserve funds stored in rows of pottery. These temples also provided loans. For example, according to an inscription from around 430 BCE, the Parthenon in Athens lent city funds at an interest rate of 6%. Cool. There we go. So that's actually remarkably low. I know people who are paying student loans with higher rates of interest than that. This shows partially the wealth of Athens. It probably has a certain amount to do with civic trust. And I imagine only Athenian citizens were given to that. And there's probably someone who is vetting what people are doing, right? Are you buying goods here to sell them elsewhere? That seems relatively simple. Are you trying to explore new lands to open up new ports? That's going to be a much higher interest rate. That's got a high chance of failure.
You've returned. I hope you enjoyed your stroll through the port. Piraeus was important to Athens' commercial interests, but it eventually came into its own as a vibrant and bustling port. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask.
I think we're ready for a quiz.
If you say so. Let us see what you've learned, wanderer. First,
anyone
a simple
in chat
question.
with the answers.
Which Athenian politician originally encouraged the development of Piraeus' natural harbors?
Ooh, this is going to be a big name in the coming weeks. Pericles, Alcibiades, Themistocles, or Leonidas. So, he is one of the first democratic politicians. In fact, I've often called him the first. He's the first person to start to glad hand with the poor. He is a noble, but he doesn't make a big deal of his noble status. He is a citizen only because of Cleisthenes' democratic reforms. He builds a house in the Ceramicus, the central industrial district we saw last week. He entertains many people, and he starts to practice law on behalf of people who otherwise might not be able to afford it, in order to then propel him into his career as a politician. I see no one in chat. This is number 3, Themistocles.
Correct. Themistocles saw Piraeus' potential as a port and encouraged its development. On to the next question. What did the Sitophilakes supervise?
Oh god. Sitophilakes. Sitophilakes. Weights and measures. That's the metronomoi. The grain commerce. I think that's it. The collection of the Pentacoster. Love that. That's the 2%er, but we know that that's the Pentecostalogoi. Maybe. Or loans. I think it's grain commerce, right? These are the people who would face the death penalty if they failed in their duties. Also, last point on Themistocles, he's also the guy who urged the fortification of the Piraeus against the Aeginetan pirates, and then pushes for the building of an Athenian Navy after the discovery of the Mines of Laurium, which we're going to see
Yes,
next after this.
Sitophilakes had the extremely important responsibility of handling all matters related to grain commerce. Only one question left. What was the name of the slave who took advantage of Piraeus' opportunities to earn themselves citizenship?
I believe it's Passion, right? Passion, Perseus, Prometheus, and Zeus. Okay, that's easy. Perseus is a legendary hero, kills Medusa. Prometheus is the titan who gives humans fire, has his liver pecked out by an eagle, I think, or a hawk or something. And then there's Zeus. It's Passion.
Correct.
Keeping
Passion
up that
managed to
100%
earn a
streak.
fortune
Let's
and
go.
achieve citizenship thanks to both his bank and a successful shield business. Your knowledge of Piraeus is impressive. Well done, Wanderer.
Thanks, Aspasia.
As
Let's
you
see, I
wish.
think there's a
Thank
few
you for
more
visiting.
points of interest in this Piraeus. Let's see, that's heading north. There's also, okay, that's too far away. Yeah, there's a few other places in the Piraeus, but I also really want to, I really do want to get to Laurium pretty soon. We're at about an hour. So here we are, Temple of Asclepius. Asclepius is a mythical healer. I believe he was deified, but it's possible that he actually existed. And the rod, so there's the rod of Asclepius and there's the caduceus, and they're both staves with snakes around them. I believe the rod of Asclepius has one snake, the caduceus has two. That's what Apollo holds. I might be wrong here, but I'm just going to assume that Apollo, the god, gets two snakes, while Asclepius, the mortal, gets one. Here we have a lighthouse. This is the Pharos lighthouse of Alexandria. So Pharos means lighthouse. It's also the Spanish word for lighthouse. It comes from this. But I believe it might also be the name of the lighthouse of Alexandria, or at least it's often called that. Originally, ports used fire to help guide ship navigators to land. The innovation of placing fire on top of a platform led to the development of the lighthouse. Ancient lighthouses started appearing in the Archaic period around the 6th and 5th centuries BCE. The island of Thasos had 3 marble lighthouses that took the shape of small circular towers placed on promontories. One of the most famous lighthouses was the Pharos of Alexandria, which stood at a height of 100 meters. Okay, so this is unclear. So this is the Pharos lighthouse. So this has Pharos in parentheses lighthouse. I always think of Pharos as the name for the library of for the lighthouse of Alexandria, but it might just be the generic term for lighthouse. Possibly. What do I know? Kyrenia. Ooh, this is cool. So we have the maritime trade was a risky business, and not every ship reached its destination. For example, a merchant ship was wrecked near Kyrenia in the 4th century BC, and underwater excavations of its remains have revealed much information about ancient Greek shipbuilding. The wreck's wooden hull was made of pine, and suggests the ship was built using the shell-first technique, wherein the shell of the boat was constructed before the rest of its parts. The ship's cargo included jars filled with almonds and over 400 wine amphorae. It also carried 29 millstones that were used as ballast to stabilize the vessel, and 300 lead net weights that were likely used for fishing. Right, so there's often ballast at the bottom of the ship that's going to keep it from just tipping all over the place. oftentimes this might be the heaviest cargo, but other times maybe it's so millstones were probably being transported, but they wanted something extra heavy. This is a modern recreation of a trireme. You can see the 3 banks of oars. In class, we're going to take a look at a video of them. I'm hoping that we do get a look at a trireme in the Piraeus. But these are going to be 3 rowed galleys, which means that 3 tiers of oars of galleys. Galleys are rowed ships. Oh, here is where they would be brought up. This is a dry dock. So the keel of the hull, the bottom part of it, is going to be brought in here, and they're going to roll it up. A trireme would be rowed by 170 people who, this is crazy, it might not be real. I can scarcely believe it. I didn't know this was possible, but apparently the rowers sweat so much they didn't have to urinate. I find that crazy. But if that's possible, holy crap. They would row all day. They could row, I believe, up to 120 miles, 200 kilometers a day, which is extremely fast. Here we have a trireme. This is the back. Imagine you've got someone beating drums. In the front, you, of course, are going to have that beak, right? And they actually have it painted to look just like a beak. And that's going to ram into other ships. The Persians, their ships were typically used to get their archers up close, and then they would get their archers up close, and then they just pepper the other ships with arrows and javelins and all sorts of nasty stuff like that. The Greeks like to ram their ships, and so they try to get a broadside ram, knock a big ol' hole right inside, and the ship would go down. In the next few streams, I'm going to play another Total War round. I'm going to play a naval battle. I'm really bad at them. I haven't really done a lot of them, but we'll do a tutorial, right? So as we're going to learn, Athens goes into this crash course, build a navy before Persia invades. They build a ton of ships very, very quickly. And then they also have to man them. And so they have all the poor people of Athens, all those people who aren't able to afford hoplite armor. You know how I was talking about that? Well, now there's this big class of democratic citizens who are Athenian but aren't hoplites. And so Themistocles gets them to start rowing the ships. These are the urban poor that you'd see in any city, who are attracted because they're starving in the countryside. They're going to go where there's people. These are going to be landless. They're not going to be able to afford hoplite armor, but they are willing to fight and die for Athens. And Themistocles pulls them into his program to create a navy. They become major supporters because all of a sudden they have a very important part in Athenian history and Athenian politics to play. So here we have some weapon making. This guy looks like an assassin. Super shady. What's he doing? Anyway, let's take a look. In addition to being a trading center, Piraeus also functioned as an industrial center that contained several factories, many of which manufactured weapons during the Peloponnesian War, when this game is set. The former slave Passion owned a shield factory, as did the brothers Lysias and Polemarchus. The order Demosthenes, meanwhile, owned a factory that produced swords. These factories all employed a large number of slaves and were extremely lucrative for their owners. And here we have a dude hammering out some, I don't know, some metal, something. Here we have kilns. Oops, sorry, dude. God, he's got a sword. Can you watch out? So these are how Assassin's Creed shows kilns. I believe this was also in the pottery area. Here we have charcoal. In Messenia, if you guys remember, if you were there, we saw the production of charcoal by helots. That's going to burn with a relatively even flame. And on this side, here we go. So we got to make it there. That's going to be, if we remember the Piraeus map, these are the 2 military ports of Athens. They're on the other side of the great harbor of Piraeus. There's 2 of them, and they're going to contain ship garages. I don't know what that's called. As well as a place where and the Athenians would be building these. Okay, I get it. Temple of Asclepius, cool. So here we go. This is going to be the area that they are first going to have their training wheels and start to learn to sail. They're going to start in a harbor where the surf is not going to be too terrible, and then they're going to gradually make it out to sea. And of course, the most important naval battle is going to be off the island of Salamis. This is probably that unexplored site right there. It looks there's also these places in the Piraeus. But first, we're going to get to this military area. I wonder if we're even going to have time for Laurium tonight. We might have to do that on Thursday. The workshops of Piraeus. So, with all these goods coming in and all those goods going out, a lot of workshops are going to take place or going to be built right next to the trading center, so that they can be sold there and they can be put onto ships and sold all throughout the Mediterranean. In the 5th century BC, this great statesman Pericles invited Cephallus of Syracuse, father of the orator Lysias, to Athens, where he wished him to open a weapons workshop. Cephallus accepted and settled in the Piraeus. So here we have the Piraeus, other times you have just Piraeus, the city's harbor. His workshop revolved around the production of shields and was particularly extensive. It is said that as many as 120 slaves worked there. In comparison, the father of Demosthenes, another Athenian orator, owned a sword-making workshop that employed 30 or so slaves, but brought in 3,000 drachmae a year, with the wages of a skilled worker being 1 drachma a day. So quite a good return. Yet another illustrious Athenian, Sophocles, was born to a wealthy manufacturer of armor. Unfortunately, we have little information on these large or small workshops, which were probably numerous in ancient Greece. And here we have some iron fire tongs. Here is pieces of a hoplite panoply, right? We have a bronze cuirass, cuirass. I've actually never heard that word pronounced. We have hoploi, or aspace, as they're known. I'm just making up the plurals of Greek words. At this point, I think I know, but I have no idea. I should learn them. It's just never seemed like that important of a thing to do. So this is the... What? That's really interesting. So if you look at the top, it says Piraeus civilian port, right? But we saw on that map that this is going to be the military port. Indeed, here is a trireme, whereas in the civilian port, we only saw merchant ships. So I think we're gonna make a little bit, we're gonna wander around here a little bit. Here are the famous long walls, I believe. My class will learn about these later, but these walls, which would extend all the way, so here they connect over here. They're gonna extend all the way to the city proper of Athens. They were long, right? As I mentioned, instead of Phaleron Harbor, the Piraeus Harbor was 2 extra miles away from Athens, so these long walls extend all the way from Athens down to Piraeus, but it means that the entirety of Athens and its port is contained behind walls. And as we've talked a lot about during the stream, ancient Greeks were booty at siege weapons, or just sieges of cities. And so they were once behind walls and with access to all the food the Mediterranean could provide them, the Athenians were essentially impregnable. And here is, we can just imagine some cytothalaloikois. I already have forgotten the Greek, I'm sorry. I'm setting such a bad example. I read it down. Did I? I did not write it down. That's embarrassing. Okay, so let's imagine some metronomoi sitting at this table. This is set up kind of like the Bouleuterian, and it's going to be an area that magistrates will sit. They will preside. They will probably hear petitions from people who may feel that they've been cheated. They will new merchants or people who are trying to make. Where I've already gotten lost. Just walked right through the walls. They're gonna treat people who are coming into Piraeus for the first time. Yeah, so now we're gonna head up to Laurium, and let's see, we're at 109. Yeah, we're gonna travel here. So before we go to Lorien, I want to read a quick little blurb from this book. It's called The Rise of Athens by Anthony Everett, and this is a description of the life at Lorien. The small boy crawled along the claustrophobic tunnels underground, some of them only 2 or 3 feet in diameter and too narrow for most fully grown men. He was one of hundreds, perhaps thousands, of slave miners who extracted silver-bearing ore from rich seams at Laurium in southeastern Attica. There were 3 strata of ore separated by limestone. Mining had been going on for centuries, probably open cast to begin with. During the tyranny of Pisistratus, systematic exploitation of the mineral resources of Athens began. So this is going to be the mid-6th century that they start driving down shafts. Shafts were driven down into the ground and galleries opened where slaves, chained and naked and branded, worked the seams illuminated only by guttering oil lamps. An unrecorded number were children. It was a miserable, dangerous, and brief life. The mines were state-owned and leased to wealthy speculators. We know of one leading Athenian statesman in the 5th century who rented out 1,000 slaves for 1 obol per head per day to a Thracian mine manager whom he had probably bought and then freed. Right, so here we have, similar to how people would rent ships, people would also rent slaves for different purposes. An obol could buy a jug of wine. 3 obols would purchase time with a prostitute. Oh, that's an interesting metric. Here we go. Do I need to start marking this stream as for mature audiences only? The mines brought the state welcome income. Then, in 484 to 483, a shaft was dug through the second limestone crust to reveal the bottom stratum, an apparently inexhaustible new source of silver. Untold riches were to cascade onto Athens and its citizens, like the beautiful Danae, whom Zeus visited in the shower of gold. After only 1 year's exploitation, the additional annual revenue from Laurium may have been as much as 100 talents, or some 2.5 tons of pure silver. It was a miracle, and Themistocles had every intention of making the most of it. He knew exactly how the windfall ought to be spent. So, Themistocles has just worked on the Athenians to fortify the Piraeus harbor. Let's see, where am I going here? Oh, we want to go south. And he's a longtime hater of the Persians. He expects them fully to come back to avenge their loss at Marathon. And so when this second stratum of silver is found, and huge, untold quantities of wealth have been discovered, the assembly, made up of all Athenian citizens, is voting on whether or not to give all Athenian citizens a bunch of money. This is what we call moral hazard. People making decisions that affect themselves. It's kind of like how Congress is never going to vote to stop themselves from trading massive amounts of stocks. It's kind of ridiculous, but it makes them lots and lots of money. And so what you would expect is that Themistocles addresses the ecclesia, and the ecclesia is like, we're going to give us all a bunch of money, right? UBI in the ancient world, this is dope. And Themistocles says, no, you should spend it on continuing the fortification of the Piraeus and building 200 triremes. Have I mentioned yet that the Athenians did not like rowing? They didn't row. Against Aegina, they had no... Uh-oh, did I go too far? Oh, damn it. I can't believe I did this. I'm so sorry. I have to go north, not south. The Athenians did not like rowing. They didn't have a navy. Yes, they sent 20 ships to burn down Sardis and tick off the emperor of Persia. But that wasn't a thing they do. And in fact, I don't really know of any time before that Athens really engages in any sort of naval conflict, right? They are so weak to the point that Aegina, that small island, can just run in and burn them down. And yet Themistocles is able to convince them, to persuade them to forego all that good money, all that UBI that was promised to them in 483 BC. Talk about a windfall. And instead, to engage in a life of hardship. He first says, we're going to we're going to do the, we're going to create a navy and train to take down Aegina. But that was small fries because what he really cared about, was Persia. And thank God, at least coming from a Western perspective, or a perspective that has Greece to thank for any sort of inspiration, because without the Athenian Navy, this Athens would have been, well, it was destroyed, but we would not think about Greece at all. We would not know of Greece. It would have been a footnote in, if even, of archaeological history.
Welcome to the silver mines of Lavrion.
Oh, it's Aspasia again.
The Lavrion silver mines were discovered between Thorikos and Cape Sunion, near Athens. They were rich in the mineral galena and provided Athens with much of the silver necessary to mint its currency. Because of this, the mines were invaluable to the city, and the resources they provided helped turn Athens into one of the most powerful states in Greece. We will meet again after you've seen what the mines have to offer. Farewell for now, wanderer.
So we keep talking about trusting others during the ancient world and how hard it is to do, why it's so important to have magistrates and good laws, etc. And because Laurium, or Laurion as they call it here, produced so much pure silver, it was very easy for the Athenians to mint really high quality coins. And because of that, the Athenian drachma became the standard currency in the ancient world, which then gave Athens an even greater advantage because people wanted to trade for Athenian drachmae more than they would want to trade for any other coinage, right? So it actually got a surplus or a bonus because they knew people who traded in Athenian drachmae knew that they could trade with just about anyone.
Silver mines were extremely rare in ancient Greece, which only increased their importance. Athens started exploiting the Lavrian silver mines at the end of the 6th century BCE and used its metal to produce its currency. Production at the mines exploded around 485 BCE when an especially rich vein was discovered. The mine's abundant silver made Athens one of the wealthiest cities in Greece. They also provided the resources necessary to build a fleet large enough to defeat the Persians at the Battle of Salamis. In short, the Lavrian mines played an integral part in the emergence of Athens as a Greek superpower.
Athens' coinage dates back to around 530 BC. So if you remember, Croesus of Lydia in the late 7th century BCE is reported to be the first one to invent coinage. And I think the discussion of why coinage is so important can be left for the classroom. We've had it many times, but suffice it to say, a piece of precious metal stamped with a known value to it is incredibly helpful in making trade liquid and easier. The abundant resources from the Laurian mines allowed the city to mint prolific coinage renowned for the quality of its silver. Like modern currency, Athens' coins had different values and weights. The most struck denomination was a tetradrachm, which weighed 17.2 grams. The coin, as its name implies, was worth 4 drachmae. The smallest coins, and the ones most commonly used in the agora, were the triobol, the obol, and the hemiobol. And here is the archaeological site of Laurium. Where's my torch? These people are probably slaves. They're
Exploiting the mine's resources required a lot of labor. To meet this requirement and save on cost, Athens leased out mining concessions to its citizens, who had their slaves to do most of the work, alongside poor day laborers. In the 5th century BCE alone, there were anywhere from 10,000 to 30,000 people toiling in the mines of Lavrion. Together, the workers managed to produce an estimated 20 tons of silver per year.
Cool. That's a lot of silver and a lot of slaves, and this is brutal, brutal work. Ancient Greeks extracted a number of different metals like gold, silver, copper, tin, lead, iron, and mercury. The most precious metals, silver and gold, were appreciated for their quality and rarity. They were used to produce coins, but also jewelry and other luxury objects, and even statues like the gold and ivory statue of Athena Parthenos, which is the statue, the 40-foot tall statue of Athena in the Parthenon. Most metals were traded in the form of ingots. Silver galena from the Potosi mines. Oh my god. Why you gotta open this up? I wrote my thesis about this, at least in part. Potosi is a place in Bolivia. There's a giant mountain they discovered. Oh my god, the entire mountain's full of silver. I think the mountain today is like several hundred feet lower than it was when the Spanish discovered it because they basically hollowed it out so much. It's estimated that between the Potosi mine and the mines in Guanajuato in Spanish-controlled Mexico, something like 2/3 of all the silver in circulation at one point was mined by the Spanish in the New World. Speaking of gold, silver, copper, tin, lead, iron, and mercury, so mercury is often used to separate silver from the metals that surround it in the strata, and it's there's archaeological or ice core evidence for the um, silver mines in that the Romans controlled in Spain, and they smelted so much metal and they put so much mercury and other pollutants into the air. They've actually landed in ice cores in the Arctic or in the Antarctic that we have discovered, and we can see like, oh my god, the Romans were producing a lot of silver at this time. So yeah, we're not the only civilization to put pollutants in the atmosphere, although of course we have done far more than any previous civilization. Here's a scaffolding. You can kind of see Laurium. You know what the dwarves found there.
Mining in Lavrion was a two-step process. First, the ore was extracted, and then it was refined. It took about 16 kilograms of raw ore to produce a single pure silver drachma of about 4 grams.
Wow.
Recovered artifacts from the mines provide some insight into the specifics of the mining process. Galleries were dug to follow the veins of ore. They were small and did not offer much space for the workers. They were also hand-cut, and it's believed that it took whole days to dig only a few centimeters. Once the galleries finally reached the veins, the ore was extracted and then crushed on mortar stone to prepare it for washing.
Crazy. So if you caught that 16 kilograms of ore for 4 grams of silver, I'm sorry, Cinder is back here and really cute, and I wanted to pet her. So a 4,000 to 1 ratio, which is awful. This is why you have slaves. So I had a student ask me, why didn't the North use slaves today? And it's because typically there's a certain element of horribleness to the work, right? Especially, mass enslavement, right? Of plantation slavery. Oh, Cinder does not want to hang out. So mass slavery like you see in plantations in Roman latifundia, here in the Laurian silver mines. It's often because you can't get free people to work this for any, you'd have to pay them way more money than is profitable. And so they create a slave society that deals with this instead. During the Peloponnesian War, the Spartans occupied and fortified Decelea, cutting Athens off from important roads. The slaves in Laurium took advantage of this opportunity, and 20,000 of them fled the mines. Because of this, silver extraction in Laurium ceased. This was an idea of Alcibiades, right, the trader who left Athens and fled to Sparta. And this is a nail in the coffin. Not the nail, but one of them that drives Athens to surrender. The closing of the Laurian silver mines had a significant impact on Athens' economy. Its treasury gradually emptied, and it was left with no funds to rebuild its fleet. Deprived of resources, Athens was forced to melt 2 gold statues of Athena Nike to strike gold coins. The city also produced bronze coin covered in a thin silver layer to imitate and replace its tetradrachms, a move that was criticized by the comic playwright Aristophanes. Right? This crushes Athenian credibility. People no longer will trust Athenian silver coins, and their credibility is in the shitter, to speak proverbially. In 404 BC, when the Peloponnesian War was over, the mining of silver was virtually non-existent. It was only decades later, in 370 BC, that entrepreneurs started leasing mines again. However, when Alexander the Great obtained a large amount of Persian silver in his conquests, the price of silver dropped so much that the yields from the mines were no longer enough to cover the running costs. And here we have the mining. Yeah, so it's said that Alexander the Great, so he looted the Persian Empire and brought so much wealth back that it fueled the Mediterranean economy for, I heard something like 400 years. That everyone was using the Persian treasure at that point. Interact with this. Cool.
Exploiting the mine's resources required a lot of labor. To meet this requirement and save on cost, Athens leased out mining concessions to its citizens, who had their slaves to do most of the work, alongside poor day laborers. In the 5th century BCE alone, there were anywhere from 10,000 to 30,000 people toiling in the mines of Laurium. Together, the workers managed to produce an estimated 20 tons of silver per year.
Right. So that's just a little interaction that sums up a lot of the information we already learned. So now that we've extracted the ore, we'll finish this tour. We'll do a couple of those. Maybe we'll save those. We'll see.
Mine workers used washeries to help clean rock from the ore. The washing process required a large supply of water, but Laurium was an infamously dry region. To compensate, cisterns were built in the mining area to collect and conserve seasonal rainwater. Once enough water had accumulated, workers poured it into wooden troughs containing rock and ore. The water's flow separated the lighter grains of rock from the heavier ore, which was caught in depressions at the bottom of the trough. The newly cleaned ore was collected for refinement, and the water was redirected back into a tank to be reused later.
Cool. I'm surprised they were able to use water for that. That was able to separate out the different pieces of the metal. The concept of using water to separate ore from rock is still applied today by modern gold miners. Yes, it unfortunately is. My friend has horror stories of working in the Amazon and watching illegal gold miners and poachers who are plying their trade in the Amazon itself. So here we have the, we've got, I wouldn't call them ingots, right? We've got the raw ore that is going to be pulverized into these smaller rocks and eventually probably broken down all the way. So these are the washeries, at the bottom of which are those divots that are gonna hold the heavier particles of silver, I believe. You can see that these are beginning to get sparkly.
Once the ore was clean and dry, it was ready for smelting. Its purpose was to isolate the silver in the ore. To do this, the ore was placed in a conical furnace filled with combustible charcoal. Bellows pumped air into the furnace to control the temperature. Inside, the ore burned, emitting a toxic smoke that was evacuated through a chimney. Eventually, the silver alloy was separated from the slag and collected for the last step in the refinement process, cupellation. Cupellation removed any leftover lead from the silver. The smelted alloy was placed in a cupel, an absorbent bowl made of bone ashes. It was then put in a furnace, where it absorbed the lead and left only silver behind.
I have no idea how people discovered this stuff, right? Like, oh, we've got silver and lead. First off, how do you know that it's not pure? And second, once you do, figuring out to put it in a bunch of ashes, then heat it up once again, and the ashes absorb the lead. Very cool. The furnaces used for smelting and cupellation required an enormous amount of fuel. Based on evidence from South American silver mines exploited under similar conditions, it's estimated the ancient Greek mines required 10,000 tons of charcoal to produce 1 ton of silver. 10,000 tons of charcoal, 1 ton of silver is going to require 4,000 tons of raw rock. This is quite an operation. Truly, yeah, the industrial power of the ancient world is really shocking. I mean, it obviously pales in comparison to today, but it just shows you how impressive what we have is, right? The fact that we have so much abundance of these metals and materials. So this is the cupilo. Don't call me on that. We got some. Wow, this has almost as much algae as my fish tank. Yikes.
While the mines of Laurium belonged to Athens, the city frequently leased them to private citizens who exploited the site for anywhere from 3 to 10 years. These citizens enlisted slaves and poor day laborers to carry out most of the work. The workers had a very low life expectancy, about 3 to 5 years, due to the hazardous working conditions. The dangers they faced included toxic lead vapor in the air and lung-choking dust in the galleries. However, they were fed well enough to keep up their work, and their combined labor managed to produce an estimated 20 tons of silver a year.
Yeah, they say that a lot, 20 tons of silver. It's crazy that the most profitable aspect of the Athenian economy, and the literal source of their wealth, is being staffed by the most poorly paid and wretched of citizens and immigrants and slaves. It's ironic and horrendous. The Athenian politician Nicias once bought a Thracian slave named Sosias for 1 talent, the equivalent of 6,000 drachmae and 30 to 40 times more than a normal price of a slave. The reason for Sosias's high price was that he was an expert in searching for and finding silver tunnels. Because of this, Nicias installed Sosias as the administrator of the 1,000 slaves he already had working at the Laurian silver mines. Nicias' purchase paid off, and according to Lysias, the politician eventually accumulated a fortune of 100 talents from his mining business. He was said to be so lucky, or he was seen to be really lucky, and that's one of the reasons that the Athenians assigned him to what ended up being a disastrous military expedition. But I will say no more about that.
I hope you enjoyed your trip through the mines.
I did. The slaves
We
didn't.
talk so much of Athens' glory, but we often forget the city's power was due to tremendous amounts of work. Work that often had a great human cost. What else would you like to do?
We're taking a quiz.
Excellent. Let's begin. What was the last step in the silver refinement process?
Cupellation. Washing, cupellation, smelting, and extraction. So it's going to go, let's see. I actually can't put them in order. I think it's washing, extraction, and then cupellation. Smelting is when you put 2 metals together.
Yes! Cupellation removed any remaining lead, leaving only the silver behind. Now, for the second question. How did workers acquire water for the ore washing process?
Notoriously dry region, so not a nearby river. Not going to use water from the ocean. I wonder why. It's probably because they can't pump it up, right? We are above sea level. They begged Poseidon for a well. That Poseidon already gave them a saltwater well on top of the Acropolis, and they collected rainwater.
Correct.
That
The
is the correct
workers
answer.
used cisterns to collect the seasonal rainwater. Now, the final question. Which famous battle did the mines help Athens win?
Ooh, tricky. Nemea, Coronea, Chironea, and Salamis. I can't tell you about all these. But I can tell you that it's the Battle of Salamis, right? Themistocles encourages the Athenians to direct the use of this newfound silver mine, or this new silver line in 484 BC. He says, don't give this to yourselves. Instead, spend it on a new fleet. it is 4. Very good.
Correct. The Athenians used silver from the mines to finance a massive fleet for the Battle of Salamis. It's clear your visit has taught you much. A job well done,
you put a question
wanderer.
mark after that, but after next week, you will know for sure what happens at Salamis. All right.
Farewell, wanderer. Best of luck on
That's
your
134. I think I'm gonna call it quits. Let's see. Oh, there's a point of interest there. I'm gonna hit that one. We should let's finish Laurium. It's been a long day, but gotta finish what we start, right? Getting down this palisade. These are probably slave quarters. Striking coins. Oh, cool. Now we get to see the mint. Archaeological experiment on ancient Greek minting techniques. Ah, we love this. Okay, so we've got these Dorkai Maximi, just like me. So anyone else wearing ancient Greek things festooned on their chest, I love them. Much of the silver mined in Laurium was later transformed into coins for Athens. Coin production was a two-step process. The first step was producing small discs of metal called flans, and the second was striking the flans into coins. Every coin produced had a specific weight that corresponded to its value. To achieve this precision, ancient Greeks used small pellets of silver to calculate the exact weight, then put the pellets into a mold. While smelting, the pellets melded together to form flans of a specific weight. The striking process involved hammering images onto the flans to turn them into coins. It is estimated that up to a few thousand coins could be produced in a single day. If you look at ancient coins, they're oftentimes fairly misprinted, or they look off. You know, they're off center of the circle that we like. That said, you can actually buy some of these coins for, I don't know what your definition of reasonable is, but like you can get your hand on some ancient coins that are like pretty cool. The mine today, view of the cistern and the washery. The remnants of the Laurian silver mines remain impressive today. Around 2,000 shafts and 140 kilometers of galleries have been discovered, and some ancient cisterns and washeries are still visible. Cool. Thank you. Tools. What kind of tools did they use? Miners used a variety of tools in their work. To cut galleries, they mostly used an iron chisel with a hammer, along with levels and wedges. Ore and sterile rocks were later removed from these galleries with either leather sacks or baskets of woven grass. Oil lamps and torches, meanwhile, provided lighting for the miners. The lights were designed to last for an entire work shift. Finally, mine maps were drawn on plates and stones to depict topography. Wow. As if the choking... Oh, Cinder... Here, let's see if I can get her to stay on stream for more than 30 seconds. So, yeah, more than just the choking dust of, chipping away at stone. You've got the horrid, acrid smoke of olive oil or whatever else they're burning. Maybe animal fat or tallow, which is probably going to smell even worse. Or maybe like bacon. And yeah, a pretty miserable experience, to be completely honest. There's that place on the other side of the mines. Okay, you know what? We're gonna see if this. I'm gonna ride a horse through the mines. Is that legal? Maybe. I guess the slaves aren't gonna stop us. So get to the other side. We'll knock that out, and then I will bid you all adieu. I think that will be, because then I need to prep for my actual ancient Greek lecture tomorrow, which is still not ready. Oh boy. This is so embarrassing. Someone drops Greek in the chat and I can't fully get it. Okay, I'm gonna guess that it's in Greek, in which case I wouldn't know it anyway, but I have to let my cat out. Okay, but this is further encouragement that over the course of this stream, I'm learning many things. I should learn the Greek alphabet as well. Other minerals. Copper and tin were very important to the ancient Greeks, as they were used to make the bronze from which objects like statues, tripods, and weapons were formed. And especially the Greek, the hoplite panoply was going to be made of um, of bronze as well. Lead was an important mineral as well and was used in the construction of water pipes and other features of architecture such as tenons and column drums. Right, so water pipes, they're not going to have water piped directly to their um, residences. They are going to have aqueducts that bring in water from the countryside. Hello, hello. I'm so glad you joined us. I am so sorry though that you joined us towards the end of the stream. I'm about to sign off. Lead was an important mineral as well. Da, 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 da. It was also used as a stain in ornamental painting. Lead is so it's so useful. It's a metal that you can bend very easily. Too bad it kills you. It causes horrible brain trauma. So yeah, don't lick lead or use lead in your pipes, please. Even though it makes really cool paint. Iron, meanwhile, was the most widely available metal in ancient Greece and served to make arms and tools. Mercury or liquid silver was used as an ointment ingredient as well as a pigment of the color red. Once again, horribly neurotoxic, right? Mad as the Hatters because these Hatters are putting a bunch of are using a bunch of mercury to keep their hats looking good, and then it all goes to their brain. They're insane. Also, famously keeps you alive forever, as the Emperor Shi Huangdi, I believe, thought. So drink mercury, like seriously, go on YouTube, look up what mercury looks like, and be like, imagine being 4,000 years ago and imagine and thinking this was not magical. It's truly amazing. Why is it like I'm giving a lecture? Because I'm a history teacher, and this is what I do. Uh, and so, yeah, these guys are guzzling it down, and of course that has the opposite effect of what they want. Not immortality, but yeah, they die at like 40 years old. All right, so that's going to cover the Laurian silver mines. So glad you could join me. These are going to be one of the main ways that the Greeks end up fighting off the Persians as they invade, right? This investment of, as they love to say, 20 talents of silver a year, no, 20 tons of silver a year, much more than 20 talents. This is going to enable Themistocles to encourage the Athenian populace to build 200 to 250 triremes, man them, and then repulse them at the Battle of Salamis. Yeah, I do know ancient Greek history. I'm teaching a class on it, so this is part of the class. You should follow. I can't believe you're up. If you're Greek, it's quite late, isn't it? But yeah, geez. Yeah, I'm in California and it's getting late, so you must be maybe up very early. But yes, if you tune in to this stream, we're going around ancient Greece in Assassin's Creed Odyssey, and we're going yeah, year by year. So we're in the 489 to 483 today, and starting on Thursday, we are going to get into the second Persian invasion. All right, that's going to be the stream. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I am teaching through video games, or at least I'm trying to. All right, guys, take care. I will see you all next time. Where they can trust the rule of law. And so if Athenians were constantly abusing their privileges and running screaming to the narcotic